So we wanted to add another feature to our Canadian real estate update this month, something that was suggested in the comments. Thank you to the person who suggested this. It was a brilliant idea. And in today's Canadian real estate update, what we wanted to cover is how much you need in income to purchase the average benchmark property across the country in different major metropolitan areas. And that's what we're going to cover today is the amount of income you need to buy a house in different Canadian cities. And it is going to surprise you the range of incomes that you need depending on where you are in the country. But before we get into all the details, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers, where one lucky subscriber is going to win $5,000 to put towards their RASP, their RSP, their TFSA, to pay down their mortgage, to pay down other debt, to do whatever they want with, just for subscribing to this channel. But in order to win, you have to be subscribed. So go ahead, click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and it's definitely worth it. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit. Product, penalty, price, in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss how much income you need to buy an average house in all of the major cities across Canada. This is a really interesting video. It took me some time to put it together because we had to do all of the calculations on how much income you would need, how much you would need for a minimum down payment, and all of those things. So let me preface this whole thing with the methodology that I used to do this. So we took from the Canadian Real Estate Association the composite benchmark price of each of these cities or areas. And that composite HPI benchmark price is basically a specific type of property that is comparable across the country, or a series of specific types of property that are comparable across the country, and it gives the average price for that exact type of property. And in order to do the calculations on how much income you need, we used a 20% down payment. The reason why is because most new first-time homebuyers don't come in and buy the average home. They typically buy an entry-level home and then move up on their next purchase to an average home. So we're going to make the assumption that they've had some increase in equity over that time and therefore have a 20% down payment, as most move-up buyers tend to. And we've used the new qualifying rate, which is 5.25%, in order to calculate all the numbers out here and make sure that we have very sound numbers and based on what the actual stress test is. So let's get into it without further delay and discuss what type of income you need in different types of cities. And we're going to start off right off the bat here. We're going to go west to east, and we're going to start with the most expensive real estate market in Canada and quickly becoming one of the most expensive real estate markets in North America, so that you can kind of compare across the country what it's like to live in other areas versus in that very expensive city we call Vancouver. So as of right now, the benchmark price in Vancouver is $1,172,000. And in order to purchase a property there with 20% down, the amount of income that a household would need is $212,783. So if you think about this from the perspective of two professionals, this isn't super out of line with what you would expect people to be able to purchase. Now, if you're thinking from an entry-level job perspective, this seems really high, but I was actually quite surprised to figure out that if you just have two people that earn $100,000 each in a household, that it is actually fairly reasonable to buy a fairly reasonable property in Vancouver. Now, this isn't going to get you a mansion. It isn't going to get you a super high-end property. It's going to get you the baseline kind of average property that most people would live in, but it's good to know that it takes a fairly reasonable amount of income in order to purchase that. Now, moving on to Calgary, this is of course my home city. We are at a benchmark price of $441,600. The income required in order to purchase a house in Calgary is $83,499. Now, this is interesting because the average household income in Calgary is consistently around $95,000. And that's even when the oil industry is in the tank. So it actually takes less than the average amount of income to buy an average house in Calgary, which I think is pretty cool. And I think that's a reason why we're seeing a lot of net migration back into the province, is because you can buy a very affordable home with a fairly reasonable amount of income. And it's not uncommon to see people who work in the oil patch and people who work in just general jobs making $80,000, $90,000 a year. So, cool place to live. We welcome anybody who would like to come and live in Calgary. It is one of the best cities in the world, as ranked by The Economist, by the way. So moving on to Saskatoon. Substantially lower benchmark price in Saskatoon. We're seeing housing prices there around $330,000. And again, significantly lower income required to purchase there at $63,569. So, pretty reasonable professional salary will get you a house in Saskatoon, no problem. Again, not going to be a benchmark, again, it's not going to be a mansion, but it's going to be probably a pretty nice house. Winnipeg's benchmark price is $319,000. The income required there is $61,000 respectively. We've actually seen these numbers come up quite a bit in the last year. Winnipeg has been one of the really hot markets in the country. Now, moving on to Toronto, which is everybody's favorite market right now with respect to the craziness that is happening, because if there is a market right now that is crazy and has been crazy for the last few months, it is Toronto. Now, this is cooling. This is settling down. It isn't as crazy as it was back in March. We saw June numbers kind of come off again. We'll get to that again in a future real estate update here. But Toronto's market isn't quite as crazy as it has been throughout the beginning of the year. But that being said, the benchmark price is still well over $1 million, and the income required is just under $200,000. Now, in Toronto, I think if you have two professionals who work in finance or work in the medical field or work in any other number of types of industries, I think having $200,000 in income is pretty reasonable for two professionals. Obviously, first-time home buyers going to have to start a little bit lower than the average house, probably a condo, probably a townhouse, but income required at just under $200,000 is actually pretty reasonable. Now, moving into Ottawa, this surprised me because Ottawa's had a really hot market. Toronto is obviously very close in proximity, as is Montreal. I expected the numbers to be higher here, but Ottawa's benchmark price is $653,000. Income required is $127,000 per year. Now, Ottawa has a very, very, very busy government sector, and they also have a brand new tech sector, thanks in large part to a company called Shopify, which is now a major international organization that's based out of Ottawa. And this tech sector is obviously bringing incomes up, it's bringing housing prices up. And, it's pretty easy for somebody in the tech industry to walk into Ottawa right now and make $125,000 to $250,000 in that industry, especially if you're an engineer or a software developer or something to that effect. So I expected that the housing prices there would be higher. I also expected that the income required would be higher. But if you're living in Toronto or Montreal and you are mobile in your job, I think Ottawa actually is a great place to live by the looks of it right now. So something to think about if you're not loving that Toronto real estate market. Now, moving on to Montreal, which is the last major city that we're going to cover here. Benchmark price fairly similar to Calgary here, $496,600. Montreal is obviously another hot market. Income required is $93,513. So just under $100,000 to live in what is one of my favorite cities in the world. It is full of culture and just one of the most beautiful cities on the planet. I would absolutely take $100,000 to go and live there pretty much anytime because I just think that city is so freaking spectacular. Now, moving on to our last area, this is New Brunswick, Newfoundland, PEI. Housing prices, we've just kind of said, okay, they're going to be $300,000 for that entire area on average. They're a little bit lower, a little bit higher than that, but $300,000 is a pretty reasonable amount for that area. And if we look at the benchmark price there, being $300,600, the income required to live in those cities or those provinces is about $60,000, $57,000. It's just under $60,000. Now, here's the thing about those cities is we, back a couple of years ago, had a meeting with Equifax, and they were talking about the people who are most likely to declare bankruptcy in Canada. And that was the people who moved from Saskatchewan, Alberta, back to New Brunswick, Newfoundland, PEI. And the reason why is because they got used to living on bigger incomes with lower housing costs and then moved back and had the expectation that they were going to make the same amount of money and have lower housing costs. Well, it didn't work that way. They also had lower incomes and therefore had proportionally less money to spend on those lower housing prices. We actually have seen multiple clients who left Calgary, went back east and have as of recently come back to Calgary because the amount of money that they can make here and the lifestyle it affords them is significantly better. Now, I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but what I am saying is that it is really interesting that this is one of the most beautiful places in the country. It is really, really, really affordable, but the experience is that it actually is a little bit more difficult to make that minimum amount of income required to own the average home. So, really interesting numbers here. I think it's interesting when you look at when you go west to east, it is the most expensive in the west, and then you get to the very east and it is the least expensive. I think it's really interesting that Ottawa is priced so much more affordably than Toronto, which is nearby. I think there's some really great pockets of the country to live in right now, especially if you don't want to be paying those $1 million home prices. I do believe that going forward, we're probably not going to see as much net migration from outside the country, but I think interprovincially, as housing prices kind of go up and down and filter around, you're probably going to see some people moving to other provinces in order to get better bang for their buck when it comes to living. And for one thing that I've seen in the comments quite frequently over the last couple months is people talking about leaving Canada, going to other countries because it's cheaper to live, cheaper housing, so on and so forth. I got to tell you, to these people who are giving up on Canada, to the people who think you're going to go to Europe and get a better house for less money, to the people who think you're going to go to the US and get a better house for less money, which is absolutely absurd. There are other pockets of this country that are equally as nice to anywhere else in the world, and you can still stay within Canada and buy a house and earn an income that is relatively normal compared to what's going on in the GTA. So if you found this video useful, if you're in the market for a house in the next 3 to 6 months to 18 months, we've got a first-time homebuyer boot camp, link in the description below. It is priced super affordably, and it will give you all the information you need to not step on a landmine or find a surprise in the home buying process. That course will at least save you 10 to 50 times the price of the course. In fact, I guarantee it'll save you 10 times because we put a special offer in that course from Mortgage 360 to make sure that you absolutely will get at least 10 times your money back. The price of that course is going to go up when we do our next round, which is likely going to start in September. So it's a good time to purchase it now rather than later. And I sincerely hope that you will allow us to join you on that journey, that home buying process, and get you the information that you need, that you deserve, and that will protect you from making a mistake in your home buying process. And if you found this video useful, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for watching to the end of this video. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.